Let's start the way we always do. Given the skyrocketing rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, and suicide since the release of the first iPhone in 2007 and Android phone a year later, we can say that our first attempt as human beings at creating healthy social relationships has largely failed. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard, your host of ReSocial. Are you the type of person who values nothing more in your life than your close relationships? If you are, ReSocial was created for you. We bring in the top thought leaders in the world at the nexus of research and practice to help you rediscover, reflect on, and renew the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships in your life. Let's get started so you can create the life you have imagined, a life filled with CMSRs. Many of our listeners feel the weight of real responsibility. They're leading teams, raising children, navigating visibility they didn't always expect. And if you're doing that work while your country is in crisis, while you're watching democratic institutions strain under pressure, you're carrying something heavier. Imagine holding the weight of decisions that affect thousands of people, all while you're trying to be a steady parent, a present partner, a human being underneath the role. How can you lead with integrity when the system itself feels like it's failing? Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Silard, and welcome to ReSocial, where we rediscover, reflect on, and renew how we approach social relationships so we can develop CMSRs, compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Alejandro Poire Romero, a Mexican political scientist and former senior government official who has spent his life thinking about how democracies work and how they break. He's also a father who has navigated profound personal transitions while serving at the highest level of his country's government. His story reveals something essential about leadership under pressure. The personal and political are never separate. I also need to share here that Alejandro and I go back, I think, over 15 years when he reached out to me and I was his personal executive coach for quite a while. And he always says, well, once a coach, always a coach. But the truth is, I think we coach each other now. So we've been friends and working together in all kinds of different ways these last 15 years. Alejandro, I'm really grateful that you joining me here on ReSocial. Thank you, brother, and welcome.
Thanks to you, Tony. I really appreciate the opportunity and also for the very generous introduction. Thank you.
Well, all true, all true. So, Alejandro, many of our listeners hold leadership roles where they're visible, accountable, and sometimes the target of real criticism. When you were the public face of an unpopular policy, so for our listeners out there, Alejandro was in the Calderon government. He was essentially the right-hand person to the president, and he was the public face of the war against drugs in Mexico, as well as a number of other initiatives. When Alejandro came to Washington, D.C., and when I started coaching him, he was used to traveling with about 50 bodyguards. He came in incognito, and we spent 3 days together in Washington. And it was not easy for him at all in the role that he was in. And we're really fortunate today. This is a really special episode. Alejandro's going to talk to us about what it was like being at the highest echelons of the Mexican government in the war against drugs and how he handled it. So, Alejandro, when you were the public face of an unpopular policy, how did you separate what was directed at you personally from what was a legitimate disagreement about the work you were doing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Here's a little bit of background might be useful because when I joined government first, I was coming from an academic position, basically. And I started as a sort of senior political advisor. So I had no role either in public communications or even in the security areas of the government. And towards the end of the administration, the second half of the administration, it was obvious that the communication strategy in the fight for security, as we ended up calling it, was in need of a revamp. And so, I mean, for some reason, I had been positioned as someone who could potentially do it. And you're right. It was a time in which there was great visibility. And because of the visibility and of the stakes, also my life and my family's life changed completely. People were rightfully so very concerned about what was happening, very concerned, not just about what the government was doing, but very concerned about what caused the government action. I mean, the underlying lack of security and lack of safety for a number of people. And I think to get to your question directly, in some weird way, I was aware that I was serving a role. I was in charge of something that I had to do. I was in charge of this position. I had this responsibility, but this was not all that there was to me. I think that was very important. For some reason, I had that in my mind. For some reason, I recognized that, and I knew that's one of the good things about term limits. In government, that you know that this is a limited role. I mean, you have ready to leave from day one. You should be ready to leave. You know that this is something that is just this particular opportunity that you have. And I try to do my best, but I was aware that in a democratic, and I mean, I got into government because I'm a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat with a small d. I mean, in Mexico, I was part of a center-right coalition, I guess, but I was mostly there because I cared for people's rights, our ability to choose government, our ability to adjudicate responsibilities, and to disagree and find a way to disagree that is productive, and find a way to disagree that is ultimately going to get us better policies, and people will have better chances of living a fulfilling life. So I kind of never took it personally. And some of the attacks were nasty. I was very visible, and I was the face of this administration. And, people appreciated the effort in public opinion polls. You could see that people appreciated the effort of what we were trying to do, but they were very unhappy with the outcomes. And I was the
And
face of
and
that.
and how did you, Alejandro, manage the fear associated with the role? Because I remember you and I, we went for these long walks in Washington D.C., and we were walking all across the different Key Bridge and the other bridges, and I mean, I was looking over my shoulder, and that was just for 3 days. So for years, this was the state of your life. How did you manage the fear, the anxiety that you would be singled out for trying to orchestrate a new system that was
Yeah.
safer for the population?
Well, I actually myself, I wasn't really all that scared, but for myself. But the thing that really broke me, I was still married then, and my children were very young. But was a few days after my appointment, my wife told me. I came back home, and she said, "You know what? Everyone that I encounter, they all tell me that they're praying for us." And she's like, "That that can't be good." I mean, in a sense, it's good, of course. I mean, people care about you. They want you to do fine, but they're praying for you because they're scared, and they just sort of what might happen to you. And I think, in a sense, you know, that's something that the way I think I managed that, and what I thought, what I know it implied for my kids, for their mom, was to recognize that we're doing this service because ultimately, in everyday life in Mexico, people with a lot less opportunity in so many places around are in fear of their lives and in fear of their security, and concerned about whether their teenage girl is going to come back safely from high school, whether their kids who are coming back from high school will actually not be approached by some drug dealer, and whether they will be facing violence in their jobs, and will have, not a decent court system to go to and to file a claim and things like that. And then I guess from a general perspective, you focus on what it is that why you're doing what you're doing, and then try to deal with the costs associated to that. And yeah, I mean, looking you up was part of that. Exactly, part of trying to find myself in that process, and rethinking whether I was really in the right place professionally and personally.
And Alejandro, I remember that time really vividly. And I remember, well, first of all, it struck me how authentic of a person you were. And I think that it's only developed in my mind much further since then. And I wonder, in terms of really stewarding public security in Mexico, especially vis-a-vis the drug cartels, you in the case of Mexico, most of these drugs were being sent up to the United States for consumption, versus the
Yeah.
war on drugs when it occurred in the US was really about that consumption. So, in terms of your own passion and feeling that you were really making an impact, how did it relate to that sort of trans-border trade, really, where it's Mexicans who were engaging in the drug industry, and then it was really for consumption across the border. How did that feel for you?
Here's the thing, we often don't realize just how connected our lives are, in particular, I think, in North America. And it's not just that the demand is all flowing from the United States, as the demand for so many other goods that are perfectly illicit, and they provide all of these supply chains that provide jobs and opportunities for people in Mexico. It's exactly the same thing. We don't think about those issues jointly. We have built these ideas and these notions about nations and nationalities and identities and all of these other concepts that oftentimes help us organize how we think, but also they make it harder for us to recognize how interdependent we are with each other. And in this particular sense, it's not just the drugs flowing towards the north side of the border between the United States and Mexico. It's also the guns flowing in the opposite direction for these organizations, these criminal organizations, to organize themselves and to perform all the crimes that they're performing. So I think the notion of interdependence is very important to keep in mind. That's the way I've been immensely fortunate to have had an education in the United States, and also to know many friends like you from different paths of life, and to try to think about that in a sense in which, instead of blaming each other, try to recognize each other as unavoidable partners. Once you have an unavoidable partnership, what are you going to do with it? It's like, the kind of thing that happens with your ex-wife, or the kind of thing that happens with a strained family member. I mean, what are you going to do with this unavoidable relationship? Well, you have to do the best that you can do. And you cannot hold grudges. I mean, if you hold a grudge, that's only going to be hurtful for yourself, I think. You need to recognize what is happening, and you need to repair the damage that has been done and try to address those issues. I'm not saying you can just wave them and ignore them, but you're only going to be able to solve them by being together and by looking each other in the eye and by recognizing differences in perspectives and interests, and also potential solutions. That's what it is.
Well, all right. So for all our listeners, I'm here with Dr. Alejandro Poire Romero, and we've been talking about how Alejandro felt about the political and his role in the war on drugs in the Felipe Calderon government in Mexico, where he was really one of the top 3 people in the government. We're going to come back right after a word from our sponsors. We're going to talk about the personal, how Alejandro handled some personal issues in his family, um, around the same time that he was also in this high level political role. So we'll be right back.
Is there a protective shell around your heart holding you back from the connection you know is possible in your life? It's time to find your path to redemption. Introducing Love and Suffering by Dr. Anthony Silard. In Love and Suffering, which has received 4 book awards in psychology and mental health and 99% 5-star reviews on Amazon, Dr. Silard overturns what we've been told over a lifetime about love, forgiveness, acceptance, and gratitude. New York Times bestselling author Adam Alter calls Love and Suffering a compelling roadmap for a more connected and meaningful life. When you order Love and Suffering, 100% of the author's proceeds are donated to nonprofit education programs in Africa and Latin America. Invite more love into your life today. Love and Suffering by Anthony Silard is available now at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. What if everything you've been taught about happiness and friendship is wrong? The artoflivingfree.org, the learning platform of the Center for Social Leadership, would like to offer you 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard, The Myth of Friendship, How your misunderstandings about friendship keep you lonely, and the myth of happiness, how your definition of happiness creates your unhappiness. Get your free personal copies of The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness today. It's simple and easy. Go to theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books and enter your email, then confirm the confirmation email in your inbox. You'll receive the links to download The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness. Enjoy your 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard today at theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books.
Hello, I'm Dr. Anthony Silard, and welcome back to ReSocial. I'm here with Dr. Alejandro Poire Romero, and well, now we're going to go into the personal. So Alejandro, I was with you in Mexico City right after you published this article that you wrote about essentially embracing the queer identities of your children. And you wrote it not as an apology, but as a celebration. This was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen anyone do, especially given the sort of conservative dynamics of Mexican politics. And, also you were in a very high role, which you still are, at the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Tec de Monterrey. So this was just extremely brave. And I wonder if you could walk our listeners through what was going on for you and what led you to feel that this was not really optional for you anymore. This was imperative, something that you felt you had to do.
Yeah, so I had spoken about this with the editor of the Reforma newspaper in Mexico. We still are. I had spoken about this fact, and so Father's Day was coming, and he said, "Would you like to write this story that you told me about, the coming out of my son and later on my daughter with queer identities?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'd love to do it." And it was, of course, I said, I have to ask them because it's not my story to tell, it's their stories if they want that to be conveyed. And for me, they said, oh, yeah, absolutely. They were very happy about it. And the way I think about that is that we live in a world in which not being what is quote unquote normal and the impact and the connotations of what the dominant roles are ultimately so difficult for so many people that I just thought it absolutely made sense to try to convey to parents my age, but also probably kids my kids' ages, that there is a way to celebrate this, that there is a way to sort of make it a little easier for them to find themselves, to recognize who they are, and to just recognize just how wonderful diversity is and how wonderful and important it is for each of us to recognize who we are and to live the lives that we deserve, just being who we are and to find who we are. And I think acceptance, celebration, pride, joy, those are values that in general the LGBTQ plus community celebrate and that I think go beyond, are absolutely essential and important for their identity, their orientation, our identification, but they're important for everyone. Tony, they're essential for each and every one of us. I mean, we need to be joyful about who we are. We need to celebrate who we are. We need to recognize our differences. We need to look within and try to do that. And it's very easy for both of us. I mean, we are in each of our societies, white males, and that gives us a set of advantages or acceptances that are given to us, but not to most everybody else. And I think that's something we need to, at the very least, be aware of and do whatever we can to sort of recognize that and right the wrongs that are out there. And I thought, that this was not the way of me, blaming people for not being. It was a way of telling people this is what it was for me. It was a celebration. It is a celebration. I'm just so happy, so proud, and I feel so blessed. I'm not a religious person, but I do think that life has blessed me with this experience because it's really made me, I think, a much more thoughtful, present, and in a sense, loving person.
I see that in you. It's like it took your empathy and compassion to another level. And I guess we could say that love did that. Your love for your children.
Yeah, yeah.
It's beautiful, Alejandro. And it seems that in the way your relationship with your children has evolved, it's not only been one of acceptance and love, it's also been one of increased authenticity. It seems like while some parents kind of shield their children from their work and its consequences, you seem to invite your children in and say, okay, this is the reality of my life and its complexity, its visibility, its uncertainty. What did you hope they would take from that?
My hope is that they recognize just in these high stakes situations, and I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's really, I mean, it was yeah, it wasn't easy. It is especially at that time when you really have to ask yourself, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And if you find yourself asking that question, then it means you should be careful and truthful and ask for help, which is what I did with you, to try to answer that and to really follow your passion and to really follow what you really are most caring about, most passionate about, most interested in. And to recognize that if you have a high stakes opportunity, you better make the best of it because the costs are going to be there regardless. The costs in terms of your schedule, in terms of your stress, in terms of your life, in terms of your strains on your family. So you better make the best of it. You really better make the best of it. And you really better be, caring to the people who work with you and conscious of the impact of the decisions that you're making, brave in terms of the decisions that you have to address and confront, but also take the blessing of this huge opportunity, the huge opportunity of leadership, and make the best of it. Really make the best of it, not just in terms of the impact of your decisions, but in particular in terms of how you deal and how you treat the people that are working with you and your team and others. Leadership is so important, and it's a privilege. You better make the best of it.
I have to say, I'm kind of almost speechless here, Alejandro, because that is such wonderful advice for all of our listeners. I think many of our listeners find themselves in situations where they're in a job where they're not enjoying it that much, they don't like the people that much, and they start to resent the environment they're working in and the people they're working with. And what I'm hearing you saying is make the most of it, right? Try to find the beauty in there somewhere, whatever the situation. And I think if you look at research on stress, often we feel stressed because we it's not just that we're not doing something that we want, we're doing something we don't want to do. It's also that we resent what we're doing and the people we're doing it with, and we feel like if only it were different, and that creates this weight on our shoulders that
Yeah.
just makes that work seem so much more onerous. Well, let's see, we're just about out of time here, Alejandro, but let me ask, where can our listeners learn more about the good work you're doing to help us improve our relationships?
Well, I have a website at the School of Government and Public Transformation. I mean, a lot of my research is there, and I will have an updated version of it. But just look me up, Alejandro Poire at Tecnológico de Monterrey. Google search or any other machine will send you there. That's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, wonderful. So, democracy is not built by perfect institutions or perfect people. It's built by people willing to see where they went wrong, to be changed by that understanding, and to try again with humility. That same capacity to, to admit it, to keep showing up, is what holds families, friendships, and communities together. As my really good friend Alejandro Poire Romero is really demonstrated today. Alejandro, I got to say, my day's a much better one from the connection we further developed here, which just seems to have been over a decade and a half, seems to be going all the time. And I want to say, in terms of ReSocial and our listeners, what you've shared really speaks to the renewal in relationships that comes from honest accountability, both personal and institutional. You can't build trust. You can't build compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships at scale if you're still hiding what went wrong or what happened yesterday that you don't want to confront. So thank you so much, Alejandro, for joining us here on ReSocial. I appreciate you.
Thank you. No, the pleasure and the opportunity is mine. One of the things that I appreciate about our friendship is how easy it is when I speak to you to connect with what I think is the best part of myself. And I'm sure your listeners enjoy this as well in every episode. So I'm very, very grateful to be here.
Thank you, Alejandro. Let's end the way we always do. Until we meet again, please remember that between you and the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships you desire in your life, lies an invisible social barrier you construct in your mind. It's entirely up to you to push through this barrier and watch it disappear into the mist. Be the change you desire and reach out to another person. Then use the tools you learn, refine, and align with your own values in ReSocial to develop a CMSR. Be kind, be generous, and be caring. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard. Thank you for joining us on ReSocial. I'm looking forward to being together with you again next week in the world filled with CMSRs we are creating together.